Well, as the G20 summit almost, well, it's still on, but President Tinubu has assured investors to invest in Nigeria, promising massive returns on their investments. President Tinubu disclosed this at a series of meetings, and one was the Roundtable conference, which held in New Delhi, India. While reiterating his commitment to growing the economy, President Tinubu commended Indian investors who made a significant investment commitment estimated at $14 billion. The president is due to return to the country this weekend, but let's get talking on the key takeaways that we expect at the wrap of this summit, and of course the efforts of the president to woo investors into Africa's most populous nation. I have somebody in the studio that can do this. Here's Mr. Kunle Ajagbe. He is the director, Nigeria-India Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So he's the right person to discuss this. Thank you so much. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
And it's your first time on the show. Thank you so much. Well, let's start with what's been on ground before now. How's our relationship as Nigeria been with India? How cordial? What really do we trade aside crude oil and all? What more do we trade within ourselves?
Okay, thank you very much for this. Now, there's a context to all that we are seeing now, and the context is that bilateral relationships have been generally quite good between Nigeria and India. Indians have been in Nigeria for ages, for almost a century now, and some of the oldest companies in Nigeria are owned by Indians or operated by Indians. So that, in that context, it's been excellent. The trip by the president is therefore a continuation of that excellent bilateral relationship to take it up a step or some steps further. The optics are very good, we must say. To have been able to, been able to generate investment pledges of about $14 billion is significant, and nothing must take away from the fact of such pledges having been made. But they are riding on the fact that over time, relationship between both countries have been good. Now, as to your other question of what are the main drivers of that investment relationship, of course, everybody knows crude oil. Nigeria is a major exporter of crude oil, and India is a major buyer. In fact, India has been a major buyer for some time after the U.S. Wasn't occupying that position. But there are several other things too. So from light machinery to commodities, we trade in so many of those things. Then, of course, we must also mention medical tourism is also a major driver of that. And that, for whichever, depending on which side of the divide you stand, it's still continuing. The numbers are still continuing. We hear a lot of commentary about it, but that is not, I believe, the subject of why we are here. But it's a major component of what is driving the trade between Nigeria and India, and it looks set from all indications to still continue to climb up. Just to share some figures with you,
go ahead, please.
As at 2021, 2022, it was estimated that trade volume between Nigeria and India stood roughly somewhere in the region of $15 billion. And the estimation, again, is that in a few years' time, it will still continue. I mean, it will continue to rise, but estimates are that it could climb to as high as $20 to $25 billion in the next couple of years. So it's the numbers are good. The optics of this presidential visit to India is quite good. Part of the context, again, which I must very quickly mention, is the fact that this is the G20 summit, which is rotated amongst the 20 countries who are members. Ordinarily, Nigeria is not a member. However, the host country, in this case, India, they do have a measure of discretion as to inviting some additional countries. And one of the additional countries they invited was Nigeria. And that in itself speaks volumes of how they see the relationship with Nigeria. They could have invited any other person or any other country for that matter. And that our president went there is also, I believe, a way of indicating to not just the government of India, but also to the private sector of India that Nigeria is open for business. As far as investment drives and pitches go, I don't think it could have been better than this. There are other issues related to this trip. How to translate that, we can talk about that, but so far so good, I will say.
I think President Tinubu is speaking the language the investors want to hear. Don't procrastinate. Bring your money in. The country is opened. We'll do this. We'll do that. But before we move into, because I'm interested in turning this into Naira and Kobo. That is what Nigerians want
We
to
all
hear.
are.
Everybody
We
is
all are.
interested
We
in
all
that.
are.
But let's also look at, I think they're also looking at innovation and digital technology.
Yes, correct.
I think that's also a way to go.
Yes.
What do you think India has to offer knowledge sharing?
Okay, I think they have a lot. And again, to give some context to it, there are lots of similarities between India and Nigeria, particularly in terms of our colonial heritage, in terms of our social makeup. Despite their phenomenal accomplishments, quite recently it was in the news that India launched a satellite to the moon, landed on the south side of the moon, which is not the usual landing spot. So they've accomplished a lot in that respect. Now, all of it has been driven by homegrown technology for them. And those are things that we have to rise up to the occasion. But in the context of what you have also asked me is the fact that by all accounts, India is a major home and hub for ICT, in information and communications technology. Yes. And in many ways, they've adopted and adapted technology to suit the peculiarities of their environment. So whether it's in terms of payments, whether it's in terms of just using technology to solve even basic problems, and in the media, yes. I know for a fact that a number of banks in Nigeria, for instance, use technology and software from India, and that's just one of several spaces in which Indian technology has a footprint in Nigeria. I'm privy to several others, but that is to give an indication of the fact that there are things that we can copy and learn from in that respect. So collaboration is key, and it's the right way to go, in my view.
Let's move a step forward and translating this to creating jobs.
That's the key thing.
That's the key thing.
Yes.
Jobs, making maybe a little bit around our value of our currency. It will have an impact one way or the other. Anything that has to do with international trade. What do you think about our policies also? Because our policies will make these guys also come in.
Yes.
So I think it's like it's a two-in-one thing. How do we translate this? Or what policies do we need to institute for us to be able to get the fruits, the benefits of these positives?
Okay, so it's not one thing, but several things rolling into the other. I think, again, to take a step back, the trip was a good idea. The sales speech made by the president was also quite good. He has a team, he's the captain of the team, and encouraging the investors to come into Nigeria. Now, that's on the good side, the optics, and then delivering the message. However, we must also realize that as good as all of this has been, these are still pledges. They are pledges by business people that I will do A, B, C, D, I will commit A, B, C, D amount or this X amount into Nigeria. Some of them, by and large, most of the investors are already in Nigeria. They are looking at upping the ante of their investments in Nigeria, which is quite good. However, to further engender that degree of confidence is where our issues are. So in terms of policy consistency, that has to be key. I'm aware that almost early in the days, of course, these are still early days for this administration, but they've set out to review the tax framework in Nigeria. And I know that some work is going on in that space. So those are critical issues, but that is not all. Again, the ease of doing business. There's been a lot of work which, at the risk of some immodesty, I've also been party to ease the environment in which business is done in Nigeria. But it's a continuing process. A lot of legislation has also been passed. Regulations have also been put in place to try and ease these things. Now, for want of a better expression, the devil is in the detail. So that's where it begins to sometimes get tricky for us as a country. How do we do these things? So I'll give you a few examples. Earlier in the year, the Business Facilitation Act was assented into law, and it's difficult to argue against many of the provisions there. However, again, the devil is in the detail. The way I would like to see it is that it is work in progress, but we must also keep sight of the fact that Nigeria stands to benefit. So name it in terms of job creation, taxes for government, exchange of knowledge, exchange of technology, all of those things are boxes that will be ticked favorably in the direction of Nigeria. But we need to get those basics right. The policy consistency is key. The tax environment, too, is also key. Certainty of the law, the rule of law itself. I'm a lawyer, and these are things that matter. The rule of law is key. Investors will bring in their money where there's a fair degree of certainty, a level playing field. Those are key indicators. And you see, as good as that trip was and still is, all of these gentlemen, all of these business people also have access to information about Nigeria. So it's fine for us to make those kinds of, business pitches to them. But let us be mindful that they are also privy to what is going on. So we need to, in reality, back up what we are talking about.
And backing that up is where we go to get that investors' confidence.
Yes.
Because investors' confidence is what will drive this, even in our stock markets and everywhere. I like to ask you, you're a director at the chamber and you deal with a lot of business people.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges at this time that you think government needs to face head on? President Tinubu gave an example of what happened in the oil and gas industry with Undurama and how Mele Kyari was able to. I think we need to start to sort out all of these issues, just head on, getting those to make those decisions. I mean, just like the ease of doing business thing that the former vice president was all around, meeting with SON, CAC.
Correct.
So can you highlight some of those?
Okay, so challenges? In no particular order, ease of doing business is a very generic term of how confident people from within Nigeria and also outside would have about our business environment. So in no particular order, the tax framework has to be certain, it has to be fair, it has to be transparent. Again, that's work in progress, but there's something to be cautiously cheerful about, which is that the federal government, this government has recognized that there's some work to do in that space. Yeah. So that's something we need to be mindful of. Second thing, too, I must re-emphasize, we must do more than paying lip service to the rule of law. So the rule of law is not just about politicians and so on. It is about you and I. If I have a contractual dispute with you, what is the position of the law with regards to this dispute? Is it certain, or is it likely that the court may or may not rule given this set of facts? Nobody's asking for mathematical precision now, but that certainty that my dispute will be resolved before an impartial arbiter. Those are things that matter. There are other things as well, of course. The ease with which I can bring in money and ease
get
with
the money back.
And also take my money out as well. Then you also, as an investor, whether again, some of these things are faced by even local businessmen. So we've heard stories. Your company, you go to work one morning and somebody from the council or some agency comes and they say they are shutting you down. Now, no excuses for anybody who is breaching the law. But care must be taken to balance it. When you shut down that company or that factory, it has an impact on the salaries of people you are paying. Again, no excuses for breaching the law, but there has to be certainty around some of these things. So there are plenty of these issues. Again, going back to where we are in India, we must be able to take many of these pledges and how will the federal government action it? What are the things that would typically concern people who want to bring in money or investment or technology into Nigeria? Is there a way in which it is easy to bring it in and take it out? Yes, there's a framework for that, but again, to simplify it is an ongoing process. So there are challenges here and there, but I think once the will is there, it can be done.
That will, very, very, very important. I also look at brand Nigeria. Some say we need to rebrand our country and, have that so that we change our mindset that some countries have about us. And President Tinubu seems to be leading this from Kenya, the vice president representing him at Johannesburg, but he's been pushing and telling people that you need to come home. Do you see anything about that brand Nigeria?
Okay, so I'm not a branding expert.
Of course.
So I can only make a limited comment about that. But I think that, yes, from a business point of view, from a legal point of view, that's the way to go. However, at the end of the day, don't forget that people also say charity begins at home.
At home.
So
True.
the people we're talking to, whether in Nigeria or outside the country, they have access to the information about us. Has Nigeria always gotten a fair representation globally? Well, we can argue it hasn't. But I choose not to look at it that way. Rather, let us get our acts together. Hopefully, we're on the right track, is what I can say about that branding part.
Indeed. The president will also be in America, I think, some in the
Yes, for the UN,
for UN General Assembly.
General Assembly.
You know,
yes.
so it's like a lot is happening, and it's going to make a speech there too. So let's just wrap up. Like, what is your outlook for the entire business community if we continue at this pace? The likes of Tony and all of that are going with the president everywhere and trying to say we need to change this narrative. You know, what do you make of that?
Okay, so again, given where we're coming from, I think there are noticeable improvements. And, so far, the business community, the feelers that one gets is that there's cautious optimism. But my issue, and I think that for many who I speak to, is we need to back up those policy assertions with policy consistency, a transparent and fair tax framework, rule of law commitment. Those things are key to ensuring that we're able to take all of these things forward.
It's a good way to leave it. I must thank you so much, Mr. Kunle Ajagbe, Director, Nigerian India Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Thank you.
We'd like to have you in subsequently to discuss issues on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right.